Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Today is parts 3 and 4 of the history of Anderson's 8th Street. And for those of you who were not here the last time when I did parts 1 and 2, I prefaced that presentation with this information. In all of the years that I've been county historian and researched lots of different aspects of Madison County history, I've come to realize that there is one avenue, thoroughfare, highway, alleyway, path, you name it, in Madison County that has enjoyed more history than any other that I think in Madison County, and that's Anderson's West 8th Street. Just an amazing amount of historical events surrounding, connected to Madison County's historic West 8th Street that I wanted to share with you. So last time I came up with 20 of them. I did 10 of them last month, and we're going to do the other 10 this month. So let's begin, and Sinitra, if you want to get the, starting with Chief Anderson legend. The number there is just I gave all of these topics numbers, just disregard that. We're going to talk about Chief Anderson legend, September the 20th, 1891. There's also a legend that says 20 years after his departure, he returned to visit his daughter, was stricken with fever, and died on the 3rd day after he arrived in the town of Anderson. The same story states that 50 years later, when excavating for the Hotel Anderson on North Meridian Street, the bones of the old chief were unearthed, but reburied under the foundation of the building. Miss Nellie Lovett, who lived at 431 West 8th Street, the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. John Lovett, wrote a beautiful story or legend of Chief Anderson, telling of the finding of his skeleton under the Hotel Anderson. That is the Lovett home. It's at the corner of Morton and 8th Street in Anderson. And it would have been there that she wrote this poem. The legend closes with the following. Quote, "It is said that on the night of the 20th day of September 1891, the 70th anniversary of the exodus of the Delaware, just as the clock in the tower of the courthouse struck the hour of midnight, the ghostly form of an Indian, clad in full halberds of a Delaware chieftain, might have been seen standing erect on the highest crest of the unfinished building," that would be the Hotel Anderson, "with folded arms looking towards the east, just as the chieftain had stood on the morning of his departure 70 years before. It remained thus for a moment and then faded out in a cloud of mist." That is the Hotel Anderson. It, of course, is no longer with us. If you're wondering where that is located, today that is a parking lot for the Star Financial Bank employees downtown. That is a relief bust of Chief Anderson at the entrance to the Anderson Country Club. There is a twin to that was in the bar, hanging over the bar of the Hotel Anderson, that when they razzed the hotel, one of our members went down there and grabbed it and brought it back, and so we have its twin in the basement of the Museum of the Madison County Historical Society. James Whitcomb Riley Day, June 3rd, 1913. He was here on June 3rd, 1913. Although he had visited Anderson several times in his lifetime, it was during this visit that he received his warmest welcome. It was a welcome reserved only for someone of his fame and notoriety. Indeed, according to many, James Whitcomb Riley was the most famous poet of the time. He was here by special invitation from his old friend, John L. Faulkner, the chairman of the homecoming committee of the Made in Anderson Industrial Exhibition. Riley's triumphal return and the colossal exhibition the city of Anderson has ever seen must have been a sight to behold. The Anderson of 1913 was a city trying to regain its once prominent identity, first earned during the gas boom era of roughly 1887 to 1902. When the once thought endless supply of natural gas disappeared, the city experienced an exodus of business and citizens. The industrial exhibition, scheduled for Saturday, May 31st through Saturday, June 7th, was conceived to attract old and new companies to Anderson. Invitations were sent to commercial clubs in 14 central and northern Indiana cities, inviting citizens to visit the exhibition. Now, a commercial club would be the forerunner of today what we call the Chamber of Commerce. And come they did. On the first day alone, an estimated 10,000 people passed through the main attraction, which was a gigantic tent that housed displays of items manufactured by 100 Anderson firms that promoters said reached every part of the world. Initially, the tent rented out of Indianapolis was to cover 8th Street from curb to curb and extend from Jackson to Lincoln Street, a distance of 4 blocks. One tent. However, organizers soon learned that more length was needed. The day before the exhibition opened, 240 feet of extra tent arrived, extending the overlength to a point near John Street. So we're going from Jackson to John, curb to curb, covering 8th Street, a tent. Several parades were part of the festivities. The one on opening day featured the governor of Indiana, Samuel M. Ralston. Oswald and Henry Nyberg were the grand marshals and rode in a Nyberg racer. This is a Lambert automobile. Fellas, in case you're interested, this is a nickel plate. A nickel plate finish. You can see the date on the wheel here. This is Governor Ralston back here and other dignitaries as part of that parade. They're out in front of the Grand Hotel at 11th and Meridian Street, 11th and Main Streets. The parade comprised floats and automobiles witnessed by crowds estimated between 10 and 15,000. It included 1,248 people, 227 vehicles, and 146 horse riders. That's a parade. It covered a distance of 26 city blocks and took 1 hour and 10 minutes to pass a given point. A second parade was held on Tuesday, June 3rd, officially designated Riley Day, in honor of the beloved and world-famous Hoosier poet. It began with the arrival of Riley's party in Pendleton around 10:30, where he was met by a 28-man escort and a large number of automobiles from Anderson. The escort was composed of the city's prominent leaders representing various interests. From Pendleton, the caravan motored to Anderson, arriving at the Grand Hotel on the corner of 11th and Main Streets. When Riley reached the hotel, a committee of 60 ladies stood on the sidewalk and waved a welcome as he rode up. He was escorted to the grill room, seated in a great armchair by a table. Each lady was then presented to him and greeted with a hearty handclasp. She laid a tremendous pink rose bearing her calling card tied with a pink ribbon on the table beside him. You see, a lady could not be properly introduced to a gentleman without giving him her calling card. At his request, the flowers were placed by his side during the dinner, and when he entered the car for his triumphal ride, he ordered them into the car. After the festivities were concluded, he took them home. While he was at dinner, a committee of ladies decorated his car with strings of clover and great bunches of pink and white peonies and roses. After dinner, Riley returned to his automobile, which at the top had been retracted so all could see him as he rode through town. The car went north on Main Street to 8th Street and then turned west. Here he was greeted by hundreds of school children who tossed bouquets of clover and roses in front of his automobile as it moved slowly from Main to Jackson. And there is a photograph taken that day. We see Riley in the back. The top is retracted and you can see all of the floral decorations that are in the car. Eventually the street became clogged with children, and Riley half arose and told the adoring crowd that he was overwhelmed by the demonstration. The automobile then proceeded to the speaker's stand located at the east entrance of the vast tent immediately west of Jackson Street. Mr. Riley remained seated, turning just enough to face the audience assembled to hear speeches delivered by Anderson's Mayor Frank Foster, followed by former Anderson Mayor John Faulkner. After the speeches, Riley's automobile passed through the tent, exiting at the west end. This is an interior shot of that tent. You see the brick pavers on 8th Street. The displays were set up on either side. It doesn't look like wide enough for a car to pass through it today, but they did. And you can see some people sitting here. There were 50 purveyors on this side and 50 on this side, all showing Anderson wares. Again, the whole idea was to show people from other cities what Anderson had to offer in an effort to get people to relocate their businesses to Anderson. They had left after the gas boom had ended, and now they were trying to draw people back. That was the whole idea. A display by the Anderson Art Glass Company. I wish I had more pictures, but those are the only two that I have of the inside of the tent. You can see it was lighted. Before returning to his home in Indianapolis that day, Riley visited the home of Thomas N. and Grace Stillwell at 708 Main Street. He was joined there by an old friend, Jim McClanahan, for what was described as a heart-to-heart chat. The two had been a team of sign painters in Anderson before Riley turned to writing. They worked for the U.S. Sign Company, which Ethel and Ayers operated. The firm was in the basement of the building located on the southwest corner of 9th and Meridian. An unsubstantiated story has persisted for some time that Riley was driven by the Riley Elementary School, which was supposedly under construction during this time. The building, which I later found out was named in his honor, did open in 1915, so that possibility is absolutely real that he could have been driven by to see it. Evaluating the industrial exhibition's impact on Anderson's business future is challenging. World War I was not far off, but in the 1920s, the city began to grow, fueled mainly by the arrival of General Motors. Riley's fortunes were headed in the opposite direction. He was recovering from the effects of a stroke suffered on July 10, 1910, which paralyzed the right side of his body. During his day in Anderson, he walked again, but he had limited use of his right hand. He died July 23, 1916, from a second stroke suffered the day before. For Riley, his day here was probably the last of many days he had spent in Anderson. He was 21 when he first came to Anderson from Greenfield in 1870 to work for the maker of patent medicines as a painter of advertising signs, the aforementioned U.S. Sign Company. After developing a reputation as a good sign painter, Riley returned to Greenfield. 3 years later, in 1877, he returned and took a position on the Anderson Democrat, which was the local newspaper, and that paid him $40 a month. His job was to write verse for the newspaper advertisements and feature stories. He remained on the Democrat for 2 years. He returned to Anderson frequently in the years afterwards. In 1903, he appeared on a lecture tour and was presented with a silver loving cup. But a farewell remark his old friend John Fortner delivered during the Riley Day celebration and stated in the familiar vernacular was perhaps the most touching. "Goodbye, Jim. Take care of yourself." Such was the affection the city had for Riley. The first Madison County Fairgrounds, 1850 to 1855. The concept of a county fair first surfaced in 1835 when the county commissioners authorized the formation of an agricultural society. That led to the first fair in the county in 1837, which was held in Andersontown upon the public square and was a private enterprise. The ground was covered with tree stumps as the land was being prepared for a courthouse building that opened in 1839. There was no admission charge or awards except the traditional red and blue ribbons. 2 years later, the fair was held at Huntsville. The exhibit of agricultural products and stock as well as attendance was small, which must have been discouraging to the society. Our county's population was approximately 8,800 citizens, but apparently the interest was not there, and like the first one in 1837, it did not repeat the following year. The society was short-lived, and no more fairs were held in the county until 1850, when another society was formed. It was known as the Madison County Agricultural Society. The society selected a site in Anderson to hold the fair and leased 25 acres. The area was roughly bounded by present-day John Street, Madison Avenue, 8th Street, and 10th Streets. Running through the site diagonally was a stream of water known as Green's Branch. The fairgrounds were on the north side of the branch with the entrance on the Strawtown Road, which was 8th Street. The first fair was held on September 14th and 15th, 1850. Fairs were held here annually until the lease expired in 1855. The society, having no suitable site to continue the fair, was forced to leave. Story Alfont victims, February 2nd, 1924. On February the 2nd, 1924, two interurban trains collided head-on in a crash at Alfont, Madison County. The crash and resulting fire took 21 lives. It was the worst single disaster regarding lives lost in our county's history. When the fire had died down, the burned bodies were taken to the Elmer S. Albright funeral parlors at 12 West 8th Street in Anderson, where the coroner, Jesse Helbert, began the tedious task of identification. These buildings here today, Bickles is in part of it. This is where the funeral parlor was located, the Albright Funeral Home. Anderson's oldest existing house. I'm often asked where the oldest house in Anderson is located. I consulted the Madison County interim report published in October 1984 for the answer. The interim report compiles all the best information relative to structures, including style and estimated or known construction dates in Madison County. On page 51, the authors have the Samuel Hanna House at 311 8th Street listed as a free classic 1849/1861, meaning it began in 1849 but was not finished till 1861. It took 12 years. I can find no other house dated earlier than 1849, so I believe this is the oldest house in Anderson.
Oh, it's beautiful.
The third Madison County Fairgrounds, 1868. Several public-spirited citizens met in Anderson on May 16, 1868, and organized a joint stock fair association. It was known as the Madison County Joint Stock Agricultural Society, and on May 31, 20 acres of land was acquired across Strawtown Road and slightly northwest of the old Anderson Fairgrounds of 1850-1855. The area that I'm speaking about is here, and you see this circle here, that is the racetrack, which we'll talk about. This, incidentally, for those of you who know there, this is Madison Avenue, also known then in those days as the Fairground Roads, and it stopped at White River. The area purchased was immediately north of the present-day 8th Street, west of the railroad to the Fairgrounds Road, Madison Avenue, and north to the vicinity of present-day 3rd Street. It will be recalled that in 1867, this was the site of the public hanging of Milton White, which we talked about last month. So the area involved, this is a Google Earth shot of the area today. This is 3rd Street, this is 8th Street, this is John Street, and this is Madison Avenue. Of course, it's all developed. But this was the fairgrounds. Very, very, very popular fairgrounds. It was held in this location in the fall of 1868. A sizable amount of money was spent to improve the facility. One of the first things done was to build a 7-foot plank fence surrounding the grounds, complete with gates and an entrance. There was an office and a dining hall as well. An amphitheater was erected for presentations, plus 3 halls were built for exhibitions. They were named Floral, Mechanical, and Art. One hall measured 20 by 80 feet, another 20 by 30 feet. There were several cattle and horse stalls along with sheep and hog pens. 3 wells were sunk, walled, and furnished with pumps to provide the livestock and patrons with drinking water. However, the main feature of the fairgrounds was the 1/2 mile circuit track that ran parallel to the Fairgrounds Road, Madison Avenue. It was situated roughly between what is today 7th Street and near 3rd Street to Madison Avenue and Hendricks Street. The track was utilized to exhibit horses in harness and under saddle. Again, using the same map or the same Google Earth shot, I've shown you the dimensions of the racehorse track, a half-mile track. Trotters, pacers, and runners were trendy and drew large crowds. Thursday was always considered the best day because thousands attended the fair to see and enjoy the horse racing. Stones encircled the track to keep the horse and rider within the track boundaries. They did not build a fence, they just lined the track with stones. Well, one of those stones has survived. I found it right here. How do I know that? I know it. The grounds became famous throughout Indiana for their beauty, being situated among numerous large oak trees and the accommodations provided for exhibitors and the public. Over the next 19 years, attendance was strong. It was reported that on the 3rd day of the 1873 fair, more than 1/3 of the entire population of Madison County was present on the grounds. Well, I was curious. The county's population in 1873 was approximately 24,000 people, meaning 8,000 were in attendance on that September 4th, 1873. From 1887 to 1890, interest in the fair began to fall off. The decrease in attendance caused the society to become involved in debt. In addition, Anderson had grown beyond the limits of the grounds in every direction. You see, this was during the gas boom. And all kinds of people were coming to Anderson for business purposes, and they were building homes. Ground was needed, and this was very attractive ground. The city desired to open streets through the property and open it to development. The society's stockholders decided it would be in the association's interest to dispose of the grounds and settle its affairs. The decision came after the 1890 fair. That winter, the Indiana legislature passed an enabling act authorizing the society to sell and convey all corporate property, distribute the proceeds, and cease to exist. The fairgrounds were divided into lots and dealt with the act's passage. Today, this is that area fully developed, known as the Fairgrounds Addition. Still, the many big trees that were part of the fairgrounds are still there today in the homes that are located in that area. Again, it was developed for purposes of the growth of the city. It became more profitable to have it developed into homes than it did as a fairgrounds. Home Hospital. Interesting story. The Home Hospital was founded by Ernest Pierce, who came to Anderson in 1920. Pierce was a native of Cornwall, England, and a mining engineer by profession who, in mines of northwest Canada, had done much first aid work among the stricken miners. He selected a building that suited the modest needs of his first venture in the hospital field, and it became successful under his administration. The opening of the Home Hospital in Anderson was the outgrowth of a movement for the founding of a Protestant hospital in the city to provide citizens an alternative to St. John's Hospital, a Catholic hospital. There was actually people who would not go to a Catholic hospital. So the Protestant hospital was built to provide for that need. Home Hospital was opened in 1920 at 325 to 333 West 8th Street. It operated for 5 years, closing in 1925. The building then became the Mashallah Apartments, Mashallah being a word of Turkish origin, meaning God be with you. On Saturday morning, February 22nd, 1936, the former hospital was destroyed by fire. And I really got lucky here. I have an image of that. You see the fire trucks in 8th Street. It's February, snow. You see the ladders going up. This is the old hospital building, and it was destroyed by fire. That's the only picture that we have of that former hospital building. Today's site is the Elmo Funk Memorial Park at 329 West 8th Street. I know you've all seen that. That's the site of the former hospital. Get ready for a laugh. Retired fire horses. I love this story. Before motorized fire trucks, actual horsepower was utilized to deliver men and equipment to a fire. Parked in the #1 station at the corner of 8th and Central, the fire wagon was loaded and ready to respond to the sound of the fire alarm. Stabled in the same bay on either side of the wagon were horses conditioned to react to the same alarm. And here you see a fire wagon with horses coming out of #1 fire station. When that alarm came, the horses assumed their positions to be made ready to move out quickly. In other words, when the alarm went off, the horses moved out of their stables over in front of the fire wagon and stood while they were hitched up. They were conditioned to do that. Many of those fire runs took them west on 8th Street with the horses galloping at their fastest. You see, it was estimated in those days that a fire wagon fully loaded with equipment and firemen and 2 horses pulling it, those horses could run at full gallop for half a mile. And then they would lose steam. Another fire station would have been built another half-mile distance, and that fire station would have responded to fires in that second half mile. That's how our fire stations were positioned initially. Fire stations 1, 2, 3, and 4 were all, 1 was downtown, 2, 3, and 4 were all a mile away, half a mile distance between the two. That was the reasoning for it, was for the horses. Over time, the rigors of the job, coupled with their age, earned the gallant steeds a well-deserved retirement. One such set of horses was granted a retirement home by a lady whose compassion and love for them earned them a spot in her large, fenced backyard where they could graze and rest to their heart's content. Time has allowed her name and her place of residence to fade into obscurity. In other words, I don't know who she is or where she lived, but I just know the story well. However, what is known is that she lived somewhere on 8th Street, not far from the downtown area, and on the fire route previously described. Well, it didn't take long for the fire run, with all its associated noise of bells clanging, to approach her residence. The 2 new retirees were conditioned as they were to the noise heard by the approaching apparatus. The lovely lady later told that the last thing she saw was the 2 retirees clearing her fence and galloping at full speed, heading west on 8th Street to join in. One wonders if she ever got them back. This is not on 8th Street, but it's a mile or a block off of it, and it's worth mentioning to you. The John W. Lambert House, 1899. John W. Lambert was the originator of the famous Lambert patented friction transmission, and he was treasurer and general manager of the Buckeye Manufacturing Company. They made Lambert automobiles. In 1914, former Anderson Mayor John Faulkner wrote of his contemporary John Lambert the following, quote, "Aside from his business, his chief pleasure is his home, and his handsome city residence located at number 705 Hendrick Street and surrounded by beautiful shade trees is one of the finest in the city," close quote. At the front of the property facing Hendrick Street is a historical marker about Lambert and the house built in 1899. You may not know that this sign, coupled with the Buckeye Manufacturing Company factory historical marker on Columbus Avenue, makes them the only set of 2 markers in Anderson that commemorates the achievements of the same individual. And to carry their significance even further, only one other set of 2 historical markers in Madison County commemorates a single person or event. They are observing what history is called the Fall Creek Massacre, one east of Markville on State Road 38 and the other in Falls Park at Pendleton. Historically speaking, that places John W. Lambert, his automobile business, and his house in pretty tall company. That's Lambert on the left, That is the home today on the right with the historical marker in front of it. But I thought you might enjoy seeing what the house looks like today on the left and what it once looked like on the right. Same house, just remodeled. And now for probably the most compelling story, my last one today, Louis Weichmann. Raise your hand if you've heard of Louis Weichmann. Raise your hand if you've heard of Mary Surratt. Raise your hand if you've heard of Abraham Lincoln. Believe it or not, they're connected. You see, the connection began on the night of April 14th, 1865, when John Wilkes Booth stepped into the presidential booth at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., and assassinated President Lincoln. Right after that happened, the federal authorities began to fan out through the city looking for the perpetrators or perpetrator. They didn't know what they were looking for. They were just looking for John Wilkes Booth because, if you remember the story, he leapt over the railing there of the presidential booth, landed on the floor of the stage, injured or broke his ankle or leg in the process, but escaped. When he escaped, he went across the Potomac River into Virginia, looking for some assistance with his broken leg. He stopped at a farmhouse of a doctor, Dr. Samuel Mudd, who set that leg. Then Booth proceeded on, and we know that he was eventually captured and was killed, although that is up for some controversy right now as to whether or not it was really Booth, but that's another story for another time. Anyway, that same night and all the next day, authorities fanned out across Washington and Maryland looking for what they could find. A tip led them to this boarding house operated by Mary Surratt. Today it's on the Maryland side of Washington, D.C., not far from the Capitol. The authorities went in, and there were a group of people assembled in the kitchen area of the boarding house, and they began to question those people as to their knowledge, because again, they'd had a tip that something had happened there that was worth looking into. So they began to question the people who were living there. And of course, everyone, including Mary Surratt, who operated the boarding house, said, "No, we don't know anything about it. We've never heard anything." Down the stairs, from upstairs, came one of the boarders, a man by the name of Louis Weichmann. The authorities asked Louis Weichmann, "Do you know anything about any conspiracy here to either kidnap or murder the President of the United States? Did you ever hear anything?" "Yes, I did." "Any people in this room involved in that?" He said, "Yes, that lady right there, Mary Surratt." He said, "I overheard her and others planning that event." Well, long story short, she was arrested. There were a total of 8 conspirators along with Mary Surratt. She and 3 other conspirators were arrested. The others escaped from the country and were never ever apprehended later on for the crime. But she and 3 others were apprehended. They were taken to trial, a speedy trial, if you will, in Washington, D.C., and on July 14th, remember this happened on April 14th, 90 days later, on July 14th, those 4 people were taken to the Navy yard of the Naval Station in Washington, D.C., and this picture shows you what happened. They were hung. My arrow points to Mary Surratt. She was the first woman to be executed for a crime in United States history. She was hung. Louis Weichmann was the chief witness for the prosecution, and his testimony is what hung her. He stayed around Washington for quite a few years, 21 to be exact. He was not welcome there. There were still Southern sympathizers in Washington, D.C. Well up into that time, and he always feared for his life, that something would happen to him. And so in 1886, he decided he would relocate. He would leave Washington, D.C., and he would move where family was located. His family lived in Anderson, Indiana. He arrived in Anderson sometime after the first day of October, 1886. That's as close as I can nail it down to his arrival here. What brought him here was the fact that his parents lived in a house next on the east side of St. Mary's Church. There is a parking lot for St. Mary's Church today on the east side of the building. There were homes there. His parents, mother and dad, lived there. His brother was Father Weichmann, St. Mary's Church. Then he had a sister that was married to another man who lived on 8th Street. He was actively engaged in stenographic work. Private Secretary of J.N. Heston, Chairman of the Republican State Central Committee of Indiana. When the campaign ended, he opened the first shorthand and commercial school at Anderson. It shows him living at 453 West 8th Street. That address would be before we converted our street numbering system from the Philadelphia numbering system to the current numbering system, which translates today to be 1403 West 8th Street. He was living with his sister Tilly and her husband Charles O'Crowley in that home. When I was a kid attending Riley School, I was a safety patrol in the 5th and 6th grade. You all know what safety patrols were. Don't laugh, it was a good job. That was my corner. That was my corner. And there was in the yard here a sign then that said, this is where Louis Weichmann lived. Sign is no longer there. I don't know what happened to it, but that was the corner. He was a professor at Anderson Normal University for a while. Now you're shaking your head. Anderson Normal University, what's that? Yeah. We had a university open in Anderson in 1896 known as Anderson Normal University. It was located on the 2nd and 3rd floors of the Grand Hotel, which was on the northeast corner of 11th and Main, today the site of the Anderson Police Station. But Anderson Normal University was in operation there. You could get 10 weeks of schooling for $1. 10 weeks of schooling. He taught business and he taught elocution. You know what elocution is? That's what I'm doing right now, public speaking. He then, after he left there, he opened the Anderson School of Business at 1007 Meridian Street, continuing to live there with his sister and her husband. That business was located here. If you remember the corner of 10th and Meridian, the old Hagg's drugstore, his school was here, Anderson School of Business. That School of Business evolved into the Indiana Business College, evolved into Harrison Business College, which is still in existence today. He founded that, Anderson, Indiana. In 1900, the Anderson City Directory has this information. His School of Business, he taught shorthand, typewriting, bookkeeping, and languages in his new school. He's buried at St. Mary's Cemetery, 1842 to 1902. This is his headstone in St. Mary's Cemetery. I don't have a picture of it. I don't have the picture that I wanted to show you. I have been there numerous times because I have family buried in that cemetery. Numerous times, and most times when I go, like the flowers that are in the Hilligoss children's hands out on his stone is a bright, shiny Lincoln penny. bright, shiny Lincoln penny. And that is my end of my presentation today on 8th Street. I hope you have enjoyed it.